how does gaining 13.5 pounds of fat-free muscle mass, so this is lean tissue, in 10 weeks sound? Well, that is exactly what they did in this research paper, where they took a bunch of normal folks and they put them on testosterone. These are guys who also had a background of training, meaning they worked out. A lot of times the research is not done with people who actually know what they're doing in the gym. So these people were actually trained previously, then got on testosterone, and what the results were over 10 weeks, 13.5 pounds. We're going to talk about three main things in here. We're going to talk about the body composition changes and their strength changes in the gym. Also, people have this connotation that testosterone affects one's mood adversely and increases, say, aggression or anger when somebody is researching with testosterone or on TRT or bodybuilding dosages of testosterone. And so they did this not only with the people who were being administered the testosterone, but also the people that they were living with to understand the effects on mood. And then we're going to take a look at the blood work of these individuals over this 10-week period to see how it affected their blood work. And then lastly, we're going to take a look at some of the side effects. So, with that being said, if this is your first time here, oh, that's good. My name is Sam, but for those of you who are returning, it's good to freaking see you. Let's get into the video. I wanted to highlight something here at the beginning, too. So, this is the effects of superphysiological doses of testosterone in muscle size and strength in normal men. First, I want to point out there's about 10 or so researchers here. These are either doctors or PhD students or just researchers in general. Right, there's about 10 folks across the top here. This was done in 1996. But to give you an understanding of where the bodybuilding pharmacology, bodybuilding chemistry is at versus where the medical community is at, I'm going to read this first sentence to you that they have in opening up this paper. Anabolic androgenic steroids are widely abused by athletes and recreational bodybuilders because of the perception that these substances increase muscle mass and size. But this premise is unsubstantiated. This is a perception that testosterone increases muscle mass and strength that is not substantiated. This is what they thought back in 1996. A short 24 years ago, researchers actually thought testosterone did not increase muscle strength and did not increase muscle size. Yes, I know. It seems completely crazy today to think such strange thoughts, but that's what was actually believed in the research community. It goes on to say, testosterone replacement increases nitrogen retention, which you need to have a nitrogen retention surplus to basically build muscle, fat-free mass in castrated animals and gonadal men. But whether superphysiological doses of testosterone or other anabolic androgenic steroids basically add to muscle mass and strength in normal men is unknown. Studies of the effects of such steroids on muscle strength have been inconclusive. This was actually the thinking back in the day, that it didn't work. So they were testing that out in this study. And they put these 43 men, 40 of them actually completed it, into 4 separate groups, one with an exercise component and one without an exercise component. And then within each one of those, they had 2 groups, a testosterone group and then a non-testosterone group. So there's a control and then a test group and then a control and a test group in the exercise ones so that they could take a comparison across these. Now, to control for the energy input, meaning food you eat, they controlled the diet, and they standardized the diet across these. And what they noticed what they did was they gave 600 milligrams of testosterone every single week for 10 weeks. They did an observation period to understand where they were at from the physical standpoint and from the blood work standpoint for a couple weeks before they did the 10 weeks of testosterone. And then one of the people who completed the study missed 1 week in terms of the shot of testosterone. So with that being said, let's dive into some of the results here. So the fat-free mass, 600 milligrams, is like 3 times what a TRT dose might be. A TRT dose might be between 100 and 200 milligrams of test a week. So if you're at 600, then that's either 6 times the low end or 3 times the upper end of what a testosterone replacement dose would be to put somebody at the high normal therapeutic range of testosterone, to give some type of reference point. So increase in fat-free mass in the group that exercised and took testosterone was 13.445 pounds or something like that. So basically 13.5 pounds of fat-free muscle mass, or lean mass, you can think of it, because there's going to be more fluid retention in the muscle as well. 13.5 pounds. So this reminds me of the first time that I actually researched with testosterone, and I stacked that with something else, and I gained 20-something pounds in, I don't know, remember how long the cycle was, maybe it was 10 weeks, maybe it was 16, I don't know exactly, but I gained over 20-something pounds in that first cycle. And they left out people who had used anabolic steroids. So these people have basically virgin androgen receptors, which means that they're going to have a bigger effect on it. The groups that were a placebo didn't really see any muscle increase. The group that had testosterone that did not exercise saw an increase in fat-free mass of 3.1 kg, which is 6.5 pounds. So they didn't work out. And they saw an increase of 6.5 pounds of fat-free mass. That's incredible over 10 weeks. The group that did work out saw around a 4-pound increase. So this is just people who are working out. So the group that was not working out but took testosterone saw a bigger increase than the natural group that was just working out. One had 4 pounds, the other one had about 6.5 pounds. So that's pretty interesting, right? Especially when you get to the 1 rep max. So they tested the strength of these people on bench press, squat, and maybe something else. 1 rep max at the beginning, at the baseline, and then 1 rep max at the end to understand where they were at and if they had increases in strength. And the group that was the placebo, no exercise, didn't have any changes, which that's fucking expected, right? Like if you don't change anything in your life and you want to make more money, then like what's going on? Like you clearly don't expect to actually make more money if you don't change anything in your fucking life, right? Like that's just common sense. So that would be expected of the placebo group. Now the group that did not work out but took testosterone, they saw, I think it was 11% or a 10% increase in bench press and 11% increase in squat, or vice versa. The group that was doing exercise, they had and the amount that the testosterone group that was not working out saw relative to the group that was natural that was working out. So remember, there's 2 groups, not working out and working out, and then within each one of those, there's 2 groups, subgroups, right? Testosterone, not testosterone, testosterone, not testosterone in this exercise group. So when you compare the testosterone of not working out to the group over here that was working out but no testosterone, they had virtually the same results, which you can think of, right? When I was looking at this data, it's kind of interesting because we're going to talk about muscle size, and they measured the triceps in the quads using an MRI. They took an MRI of those to understand the size differential. And even though the strength was about the same between the natural workout group and the testosterone sedentary group, the muscle size increase between those 2 groups was substantial. The group that took testosterone had way more muscle in terms of muscle size than the group that worked out but was not taking testosterone. So the volumization, the extra nitrogen retention is substantial when taking testosterone versus the not taking testosterone. It works in terms of the strength about the same as a training program would. They had virtually the same numbers. One was like at 10%, the other was 11, and then the next one was at 11, the other one was at 10 or something along those lines. Very, very similar. But the group that really excelled is combining the testosterone and working out. I don't have the number here, but it was their squat increased by a substantial amount, and then their bench press increased by 38%. I didn't write down the other numbers in here, unfortunately, but they had a substantial increase in their bench press and their squat relative to all the other three groups, like just substantially higher. Then they also had a substantial, now let's talk about the muscle size, and then we'll get into the mood before we talk about the blood work and then the side effects. Muscle size. I've got this awesome little, I think this one was for the muscle size here. Changes from baseline fat-free mass. So this is the cross-sectional. Okay, so they did the tests here. We have on the left-hand side, we have the group that did not take testosterone or did not work out, and the group on the far left is the group that did not work out and did not take testosterone. This group here did take testosterone. So when you look at the fat-free mass, as we talked about, the fat-free mass of the testosterone group, as we mentioned, we already talked about, increased more than the group that was working out but not taking testosterone. And you guys can see the group on the far right is the testosterone group that worked out. Like, they're just substantially higher than everybody else. But what's interesting here is there's barely any increase in tricep size. So I did read through what they were doing for a training program, and it looked to be tailored more towards a strength training program. They put them on 6 reps, 4 sets and 6 reps, and then at the 5th week, they actually increased the weight marginally. So the size in differential in the triceps is pretty crazy because they weren't doing a hypertrophy type workout. They were doing more of a strength workout here. And you can see that there's barely any gain from the group that worked out but was natural, and also the group that did not work out but was taking testosterone. They had a big increase, almost the same as the group in terms of that was taking testosterone and working out. Not quite, but almost. The quadriceps. Quads, in terms of the size, the group that was working out but natty, they gained almost the same amount as the testosterone group that wasn't doing anything. So basically, you can take testosterone, get stronger, get bigger muscles, and not do anything. Period. Pretty simple. But I think we already kind of knew this, and this is just confirming that data for us. The last one here is bench press. So we get to see here the placebo group, the one that didn't do any testosterone, the one that didn't do any working out. They got worse from their tricep size. Their triceps got smaller. Their atrophying. Their quads got smaller. Their bench press got weaker. Their squat, it looks like, got a little bit stronger. That could just be because they never work out, or they're not used to working out, and they did it 10 weeks ago. So then there's a little bit of muscle memory left over from that standpoint there. But you get to see here that it just continues to hold across the board. The only thing that was a little bit different here, as I mentioned, the group that was the placebo in the exercise increased their squat a little bit more than the testosterone group that was sedentary. Bench press, so it actually looks at, maybe it was like 11 and 11 or 11 and 10 and 11 and 10 or something like that in terms of the group that was exercising. So the strength increased in the sedentary group with testosterone, but the exercising actually helped more with the strength. And that just makes sense that, like, if you're actually exercising, meaning you're trying to do something, it is probably going to help. The researchers also noted so they had a 38 questionnaire that they gave to the people who were taking testosterone, but also to the people, if they had a spouse of some sort or somebody they were living with, they gave the same questionnaire to the people that they were living with. there was no increase in aggression. There was no increase in anger. There was no mood changes that were notable enough to actually document here in this paper. So the idea or myth that testosterone increases someone's aggression or anger or mood is more of a fallacy. And this, I mean, from my personal experience, it is exactly the case. It increases the sense of well-being. You feel better, but that does not mean that you want to go fight somebody or start an argument or anything along those lines. You just feel better about everything in life. So in the one sense, it could actually mean that, like, if you feel better about everything in life, a lot of people are going to be less insecure, right? Insecure people tend to start fights. So if somebody's insecure, they take testosterone, now they feel more secure about their well-being, then they actually start less fights. So the argument could be made that testosterone actually decreases the amount of anger and aggression and fights that are presented if you did two different groups. I don't think they're going to do that research because that's a pretty progressive way of thinking about it, but I definitely could see that being the case from anybody who's actually taken testosterone. It is pretty evident that there's a substantial increase in one's sense of well-being, but there was no change in terms of the mood. So now let's go over some of the factors in the blood work before we get into the very marginal side effects here. So these are going to be side effects in terms of physical side effects, but then we're also going to take a look at the blood work, right? So the blood work is a type of side effect potentially, and then the side effects, other side effects physically. Total testosterone, free testosterone, this is going to be comparing the baseline levels of all 4 groups to the 10-week mark. Total and free testosterone. So what do you think is going to happen to total and free testosterone, somebody who's taking exogenous testosterone? That shit's going to be fucking high, right? And if you're taking 600 milligrams, it is going to be high. So that's exactly the case. Relative to the baseline, their fucking testosterone and free testosterone was substantially higher. Now, when you're taking exogenous testosterone, there's your HPTA, which is your hypothalamus pituitary testicular axis. Basically, your hypothalamus sends a signal through a GnRH, a gonadotropin releasing hormone, or something thereabouts, to your pituitary. Your pituitary sends something called LH down to your balls to produce testosterone. Your pituitary also sends something called FSH down to your balls to produce sperm. And when somebody takes exogenous testosterone, those are shut down. You've probably heard of low testosterone. When you're taking testosterone, your natural testosterone does not need to be as high. Your body realizes that there's testosterone in there. It's like, hey, bro, we don't need to produce as much ourselves. It's in the system already, so they shut down. And we all know this, but the data obviously confirms what we already know, that the LH and FSH for the testosterone groups were tanked because it messes with the HPTA axis, right? That pathway. It sends a negative feedback loop. Now, SHBG, this is kind of interesting. SHBG was in the toilet as well. Not in the toilet, but which was kind of interesting. SHBG was dropped across 3 groups. So what we're doing is we're looking at this bottom section right here. It won't let me highlight it, but this bottom group here. And we get to see, this is the no exercise group, sex hormone binding globulin. This is what binds onto testosterone, pulls it out of circulation to do other stuff in our body. You can see that the no exercise, no testosterone group had virtually the same. The group that took testosterone and did not exercise also saw a drop in SHBG. Interesting. The group that did exercise but did not take testosterone also saw a drop in SHBG. And then obviously we could probably infer that if you're not working out and you're not taking testosterone, your shit goes down. And if you're taking testosterone and not doing anything, your shit goes down. Then if you're doing both of those things, your shit's going to probably drop down even more. And that is exactly the case. Testosterone group who was working out saw a big drop in SHBG. This is kind of interesting, and maybe due to the idea that if we're taking super physiological doses of testosterone, our body maybe only has the capacity naturally to produce so much SHBG. So when you're testing SHBG levels in the blood, the idea would be if your body can only go up to this high, but your testosterone is even higher, then the concentration levels of this are going to be lower in terms of the blood work. So that would make sense from a testosterone standpoint, but the exercising probably plays a factor into this in some way, because the placebo group in the exercise group, meaning the placebo group that was not taking testosterone but they were exercising, also saw a drop in SHBG. Kind of interesting. So that was interesting tell there. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it is something to at least pay attention to. Blood count. So the blood count was kind of interesting to take a look at too. Let's see if we can pull this up here. There was no substantial difference in blood count. So hemoglobin and hematocrit. I actually don't think they listed the hematocrit, but there was no differences that they noted in the total blood count, the hemoglobin, and the hematocrit. So this is, you can think of things that are going to mess with your blood count, generally associated with testosterone. They're going to increase the viscosity, the thickness of one's blood over time, right? Which could be a bad thing. Think of like going through the air, walking, versus trying to swim, or like swimming as fast as you can run. Going through water is so viscous, right? It's much more challenging. Now, think about that in terms of your blood. If your blood is thinner, it's easier to push through your veins and arteries, versus if your blood is thicker, it's more challenging. It's more work for your heart to push that blood through because it is thicker, like the water versus air, right? And so there was no substantial change in that over the 10 weeks here. But when they took a look at the total cholesterol, so look at cholesterol, HDL, LDL, and triglycerides. Total cholesterol is made up of HDL, LDL, and 20% of triglycerides. And you get to see here that in virtually every group here, HDL dropped. So that's kind of interesting. Interesting to see a drop across the board. This is in the no exercise, both of those groups, and in the exercise, both of those groups. HDL, which is considered to most people to be the good cholesterol, dropped across the board. So that's kind of interesting. And if we look at the exercise group on an absolute basis, it actually dropped a little bit more. The researchers noticed it wasn't that big of a difference, and I don't think they said it was statistically significant. But when you look at the actual data, we can see across the board, and I'm looking right here in the second line here, we can see the baseline levels. We got 39 to 36, 37 to 34, 42 to 37, 40 to 36. Anything above 40 is considered good HDL. So they're basically all in territory which is not considered good, whether they're the placebo not taking testosterone or the placebo that's exercising and not taking testosterone, or either of the testosterone groups. None of them are in that range, which is tended to be considered good cholesterol for HDL above 40. LDL, kind of interesting as well. LDL, they also noted there's no change to it. Triglycerides dropped in both of the testosterone groups. You can see that right here. In the placebo group, they also came down too, but they came down substantially more in the testosterone group. Triglycerides are just the fat in your blood. And you get to see that the testosterone group with no exercise, they went from 147. Anything above 150 is not super fantastic. So this first group went from above an area where it starts to be a concern down to an area that is more healthy in terms of the fat in one's blood. And the group that was taking testosterone and not working out, theirs dropped by 36 points. That's good. Came down by a lot. And the group that was working out but not taking testosterone, their triglycerides basically stayed the same. So that's kind of interesting because you would think when you Google or do some research into how to lower your triglycerides, like exercise is one of the things on that list. Maybe it's more of a cardiovascular, in my personal opinion, more of a cardiovascular workout, not necessarily a strength training routine. And the group that was working out and took testosterone, they had about a 21-point drop. So that's kind of interesting to see triglycerides drop so much. Maybe something about the super physiological levels of testosterone that are made up of cholesterol. Testosterone is made up of cholesterol, so that could have something to do with that. Now, the last two things we have here before we get into the physical side effects here are liver enzymes, which we don't have any data on that other than the researchers telling us the liver enzymes were not elevated. PSA, which is the prostate-specific antigen, that's a measure of one's fucking prostate size, or in this case, they're not actually measuring it. They're using this proxy as a way to tell if there's an increased risk of something to do with the prostate, and then you'd have to take a biopsy or do something else to test to see if it's caused by the testosterone. But there was no changes in prostate-specific antigen, and there was no change in the liver enzymes. Now, when we looked at the physical side effects, this is kind of interesting because 600, as I mentioned, is about 6 times the low end of what a TRT dose might be, 100 milligrams a week, right? 6 times that to 600 milligrams. Or 3 times the upper limit, which might be 200 milligrams a week from a TRT clinic, times 3, right? So that's, you would think that you'd probably experience more some type of side effect physically. And there was 2 people out of about 20 that experienced chest tenderness. So we know what that's from. The gyno, they did not talk about taking any type of AI to control for estrogen. And they did not talk about taking any type of gonadotropin or anything to increase LH, like HCG. And then they mentioned 4 people got acne. So this is a generally speaking a decently high dose of testosterone, 600 milligrams. 4 people. One of those was the placebo group. So one of the placebo groups actually developed acne through this period. Maybe it was stress related or something to do with the diet, but they related acne. Now the group that was taking testosterone, about 20 guys, 3 of them developed acne during this 10-week period. So something to at least pay attention to, but those are the only side effects that were noted in the research. Now, if you found this information interesting, I did stick a link down below for the TRT clinic that I'm actually switching to, and there's also a phone number down below. If you use the code ENERGY, there's about a $250 savings over the course of the first 6 months. That you can check it out. Call them. If you guys have questions, reach out to me on Instagram. There's a link down below. Also, take a moment and share this video with somebody or press that thumbs up button. It really does help out the channel. Appreciate you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.